Hey everyone, welcome to our second stream for Impact. It sounds like our tech is working. I'm listening to our stream. We're going to get started here in just a second. Miles, why don't you give a quick volume check real quick?
Hello, hello, testing, check, check, check. We
Yep, we
good?
got you. I think we're all set.
Okay,
Cool.
perfect.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you again for hopping on with us. We are here to answer your guys' questions live. We're very excited to have a special guest today. But quick introduction, I'm Joe. We obviously have the one and only Miles. And Miles, why don't you go ahead and quickly introduce our guest?
Yes, so this is a good friend of mine, Johnny. He actually has done a lot of missions work in Japan, and we've worked together in different ministry things. We hang out quite a bit, and so the reason why I had him come on is because our first question that we have to cover is because I skipped it from last time, and it's should Christians celebrate Halloween? So I remember Johnny kind of, we were having like a little bit of a Bible study and a discussion, and someone brought up that question. And I'm like, I'll be honest, I was like, Halloween. But then Johnny kind of was talking about his perspective on Halloween, and it just really encouraged me. And so as soon as I read that question, I'm like, I could answer that question right now, but I think that the audience would be our audience would be blessed if they heard what you had to say. So, yeah, Johnny, again, the question is should Christians celebrate Halloween? What is your take on Christians and Halloween?
Yeah, it's a very common question, and I wrestled with it for years. And I think I went like real strict and then real not strict, and I wasn't comfortable with where I was sitting. And I think it's important to know what to do because obviously, there's things in Halloween that don't line up with the Bible that are, really, really evil and demonic. But I started looking at it a little differently as like an opportunity. And I think that a lot of times we see something and we go into like crisis mode, but yeah, it's there's a danger there, but also there's a great opportunity in the midst of any kind of danger. And so yeah, I think there's like three big varying levels of Halloween. There's kind of like an innocent version, and then there's a real evil version of it that a lot of people practice. And then there's like the super satanic murderous, it gets pretty bad and illegal.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think is it innocent? It's like when I have a little girl come up to my house in an angel suit saying trick or treat, it's pretty innocent, but
Yeah.
it's rooted in pagan stuff, and that's there. But also regarding the opportunity is, I think if you view it as an opportunity to actually engage in conversation with
Mm.
someone that is curious about the spirit world, well, that's the night to do it.
Mm.
And I think I kind of started approaching it that way. And if there's people I know that are celebrating it, like I'm not going to push more conviction on them, but if they're curious about how the spirit world actually works or what the Bible says about the spirit world, well, there you go. Sometimes when you're walking around the block like with unsaved people, they're going to be talking about demons and all kinds of strange things, which we actually have that information. We have the truth about Halloween. And I think to just hide in your house and turn the light off might be kind of the wrong approach, at least for me. And I think that, yeah, that's something that, I'm constantly like aware of. However, because of the nature of the evil and the nature of the horrible things that are associated with Halloween,
Mhm.
if you're a Christian and you're not praying on Halloween, I think that might be a problem
Mm.
because it is a dark day, but we're supposed to bring light to that day.
Mm. I remember one time when we were talking about this question earlier in the week, you were kind of comparing it to like a Japanese festival.
Yeah.
Like if there was like a Japanese festival that had beliefs that we didn't align with, like do we isolate ourselves and say no, we can't be a part of that, or do we
Yeah.
actually try to get involved? What were some of the things that you were talking about there?
Yeah. So what he's referring to is in Japan they do have these festivals that are Shinto, and they're around the neighborhoods, and it's totally not biblical whatsoever. However, it's when the Japanese people come out of their houses and they're open to talk to you, and they're open to
Hmm.
you can sit there and eat noodles with them, and it's a really great thing. Now, I am not practicing Shinto. I am not practicing the rituals going on, but I am engaging with the people in their context. And I kind of liken it to,
Mm.
when Paul was in the temple, um, and they were praying to the unknown God, he introduced them. And I
Yeah.
think that's how I approach Halloween. Is I think that we need to be aware of this is an opportunity to actually talk to people about God, and you don't
Yeah.
shove it down their throats, but the curiosity is there. So I feel like it's actually a little easier in that regard, to where I know I'm not gonna some of these people I see on Halloween, they're not coming to church, so
Yeah.
I have to actually see what they're doing and that kind of thing. So anyway, I haven't really like it is important to be a light, but it's also important to recognize the darkness that's there. And whatever your prayer life looks like, I think that organizing something around prayer that night is extremely wise to do, because there's a lot of people really questioning um, all kinds of stuff in Halloween and dabbling in things that they really shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And so I don't think practicing or dabbling in things should be celebrated or done whatsoever. But
Mm.
the innocent side, I think that we can engage as the church in that way.
Yeah. I think it's good. I've really appreciated what you said just about prayer. Like, I remember hearing you talk about it, and you were just saying, yeah, I pray with my family. We
Mm,
really kind of, before we kind of do anything, we just kind of take the time, sit down, talk about it, like understand where it's rooted. And I do like the fact that you engaged. And, Second Timothy says to do the work of an evangelist. And
yeah.
Paul says, don't be of the world, but be in the world.
Mhm.
Like, we have to go in and we have to have conversations. And I've used Halloween also as just a
Mm,
day
yeah.
to say, oh, hey, what are you doing with your family? Hey, like, do you believe in demons? Do you
Right.
believe in
Yeah.
God?
Yeah.
And so it's just such a great opportunity. And so I think
Yeah.
that you had a really good balance, understanding that, we do have our freedoms, and at the same time being not blind to the things that are happening, because there are witches. People do
Mhm.
use it for evil,
Yeah.
and we should counter that
You
through
know,
prayer.
along those same lines, Gamer Dude actually kind of asked a follow-up question, sort of along the lines like Christmas is also technically a pagan holiday. Um, is it okay to celebrate Christmas? I mean, I feel like it's been rewritten. Christmas has been rewritten in Western culture as like, celebrating the birth of Christ in a lot of respect. And not a lot of people remember that it's even a pagan holiday. What's your thoughts
Mhm.
on that?
On
Yeah.
Christmas.
Yeah. Christmas being a pagan holiday.
Um, so interesting enough, Halloween was rooted in a holy holiday. So,
Mm,
one thing went holy and then went totally south. The other thing was pagan, and then it became this time where you celebrate the birth of Christ.
yeah,
Now, obviously, Halloween also has Druid origins, but the stuff regarding the Christmas tree and all that kind of stuff, I think, you know, I don't think you have to put that stuff in your house, but I do
sure.
think the opportunity to celebrate the birth of Christ and talk to people about fulfilled prophecy. I mean, what an amazing time to actually do something like that.
Yeah.
So I would say that is celebrating. I mean, most Christians disagree that Jesus was born on the 25th, but it's in that category of holiday and festivals
Yeah.
where people are celebrating in all different ways. But we have the truth. Again, we have the truth of the birth of Christ. We have the truth of what the story meant, and all the history behind it and everything it's pointing towards. And it's like, I think there's totally a holy way to celebrate Halloween. If you're having a conviction about having a Christmas tree in your house or something like that, if it's on your conscience, I think it's fine to obey that conscience, as long as you don't like say to other people like, oh, you have a Christmas tree, did you know that's rooted in that? And you got to let people discover things. And it's food for thought, but also the approach to holidays in general should be done very graciously.
Yeah.
And if you have the conviction to follow the conviction, but not everybody's going to believe everything that you think theologically,
Mhm.
or regarding different festivals or days and all that kind of stuff. And like Paul talks a lot about this stuff, and
Yeah.
it's encouraging to know that he was battling rituals and cultures, and should I celebrate this, should I eat that, and I think it's very related to kind of like what are our traditions and our celebrations. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to unpack all the pagan stuff that is
It's
there.
been a while since I actually looked into the whole like origin of Christmas and like, oh, where did the Christmas tree come
Yeah.
from? And honestly, I have a very just simple approach, and it's we have the freedom to choose, on to put a Christmas tree in our house. But I really just kind of like Jesus's birth. Let's just focus on
Yeah.
Jesus's birth. Like he came here, he became flesh, in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God,
Mhm.
and the word, became flesh and dwelt among us, and we
Yeah.
beheld God's glory. So it's like,
Mm.
yeah, sure. Like a lot of people will choose to like fight on this hill or like die on a hill, like, oh, Christmas, it's like, I kind of lean more towards like let's evangelize, let's make
Yeah.
disciples, let's
Yeah.
try to keep the main thing. And if someone, and here's the thing, if someone wants to really dive into like the origins of Christmas, by all means go ahead. Like I'd love for you to teach me,
Yeah.
because I was listening to you, I'm like, oh, I didn't know about that about Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
every Christian, like, we have different inclinations to learn different things,
Right.
Yeah.
and so I'm thankful because like Halloween for me is something that I was just like, oh, Halloween, Christmas,
Mhm.
oh, Christmas. And then like I'll focus on something else. But that's why this is kind of cool, because
Right.
then
Yeah.
we could glean
Yeah.
on each other's experience and wisdom and just come together to form a conclusion.
And I will say, like, I think most people in the Christian church are probably along the same lines as what you said, Miles. Just now, it's like, oh, Halloween is just a time you dress up and have candy,
Mhm.
not knowing all the backstory. And yeah, Paul does talk a lot about this thing where, if you didn't know that food was sacrificed to idols and you eat it, are you in sin, versus willingly and knowingly doing that,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. There's like a whole passage about that. And it's like, I think a lot of times it is what you were saying, Johnny, where it's like it is innocent.
Yeah.
They didn't know it's a pagan holiday. It's just a time for their kids to eat candy and dress up and go trick or treating. Um, and so yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is probably where most people fall in that category. And it's like, not having judgment for those people. Like, oh, you're doing something terrible. It's like, like you said, everyone's on their own journey of
Right.
discovery for those things. So
Yeah.
we're going to move on to the next question here that we had kind of from our previous stream real quick, and then we'll move on to the ones from the actual live chat. But I
Okay.
did want to call out real quick for those of you who are watching who actually do have a question and are a member, feel free to leave it in the comment section or the chat.
Yeah.
And ask your question there. We are keeping it to members only right now, just because we think that we want to keep the chat kind of tame, and we think it will probably get a little out of hand and we won't be able to see any questions going by. So for the moment, we're going to keep it to members only questions. So if you do have a question, go ahead and add it into the chat. But in the meantime, I wanted to go back to that one question we were going to come back to this time around, Miles, which was related to the Sabbath, right?
Right. And the question came from Exodus chapter 20, where it talked about the 10 commandments. And they really highlighted on the fourth commandment being the Sabbath day, keeping it holy. And the way that the Jews observed it was from Friday night to Saturday night. So, do we need to, do Christians today, post Jesus's death and resurrection, what does the church today, do they need to observe the Sabbath? And I know that we talked about it,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your thoughts again on what we discussed.
Um, yeah, the Sabbath is important because it's, one of the most commanded things in the Old Testament as far as the 10 commandments. When you look at the life of Jesus and how he approached it, it was always down to the heart of the issue. And if we miss that, we miss it all, which is kind of what the Pharisees missed. So, the when, you might be kind of getting a little too into the letter, because Paul actually addresses it in Romans, was it
Yeah, Romans 14.
14?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So that's a really good passage to kind of look at. I think, yeah, if you want to practice, Shabbat meal on Friday and then celebrate the Sabbath, and on a Saturday, by all means do that. But again, like the shift, it did happen, and is Constantine, I think initiated it as an official thing. I don't think that for me, like I the whole point of Sabbath, the keeping it holy, was a day where you're focusing on your relationship with God. Now, some people, yeah, they say, "Oh, that's Sunday morning church," but we all kind of, that doesn't cut it all the time. Sunday morning, and I do think it's important to have like a day where it's like this day is so I can connect with God, and you can do that while, in the quiet of your house. I think you could do it on a walk. I think there's many ways to really go deep with God once a week.
Right.
And you don't necessarily need to go to the Sunday morning church on service. However, the early church, they met regularly. They met for the hour of prayer, and they didn't forsake the assembly, which means everybody got together. I don't know if they were separated. I'd have to look into it. But I think it's all kind of combined into the same thing now, where it's like Sunday is congregation and it's Sabbath. To me, I've actually been shifting to where I need to make my Saturday restful. And it's not just physically, it's spiritually restful, where I can zero in on God a little bit and be like, all right, God, what did you think of my week? Because I think that's the holiness of it, is like the seventh day he rested, he thought about everything that he had worked and he had done. If you don't have that time of reflection with God, you're gonna get stressed out. I mean, there's so many things to say about it. As you have to on Saturday, I don't know if you have to, just based on kind of what Paul was saying, in Romans.
Yeah, Romans 14:5, it says, one person esteems one day above another, another esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day observes it to the Lord. So the idea is, does it need to be on Saturday or on Friday to Saturday or on Sunday? I kind of like what you said earlier. It's kind of like, what's the heart of the issue? What was God's heart when he made this command? And it goes back to what Jesus said. The Sabbath was made for man. It was made so that we can rest. It was made so that we can reconnect with God. And so, yeah, I agree with what you said. Sometimes, like for me, during my Sabbaths, I'll meet up with like friends, and I'll like fellowship, like people who I can relax and people who I know I just feel refreshed and I can pray with, or go for a walk, but I think it is important on Sabbath to not just have bodily rest, which is important, but also emotional rest, spiritual rest. So I don't know. It kind of makes it clear here in Romans chapter 14, verse 5. Some people will think that they need to honor the Sabbath on like the actual day, and I think that there's a lot of people who probably have that conviction from God, and rightly so. Like God gave them that conviction, so they should keep it if that's what they feel like they need to do. For me, I don't have that conviction. So sometimes for me, like I'm kind of leaning, like last week after we did the live stream, I was exhausted. So I'm kind of leaning now. I'm like, maybe Monday should be my Sabbath, because normally Sundays are a busy day. Like I had to teach at a church today, and Saturday is normally my prep day for Sundays. So it's not like, well, everyone else doesn't have that. And sometimes I teach on Bible study on Fridays, so it's kind of like I have to figure out the day that I don't really have Bible studies or teaching or responsibilities. And that's the day where I kind of unplug. So yeah, one person esteems one day above the other. I think that's kind of where I would hang my hat.
Yeah, right. Because it's all types of people for hundreds and thousands of years and different schedules. And, we made a great point. Most people working in church, Sunday is not a rest day. Most pastors take their rest day Monday. I'm glad you said that. That's really true.
That's a good point. Yep. That's when they're serving and they need their rest. Good question, guys. So we got one from Phoenix here, and looks like it's a two-parter. So I'll read it out loud here. Who are the 144,000? Are they from all over the world? And what would they do? For example, kill demons and heal people? And then the second part is, and what is the 12 tribes of Israel, and could I become one of these people?
Okay, so the 144,000, we actually had quite a few comments about the 144,000. So these people are sealed. I actually am not sure. I know your biblical perspective or take on the 144. Let's go ahead and find it. I know that they're sealed. Here we go. So it's from Revelation chapter 14, if we want to look at it.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and read it since we're going to go ahead and tackle this question, because it says, who are the 144,000? Are they from all over the world? I know that's a no, because it talks about who they are. But anyways, it says, then I looked and behold a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having the Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of the harpists playing the harps, and they sang as if it were a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These are the redeemed. These were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. So I think there was another portion of the 144,000, because I could have swore that the 144,000, there were particular people sealed, like 12,000, I think, sealed. I'm trying to find that passage right now.
That sounds familiar as well. I wouldn't.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts on? Oh, here we go. The sealed.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. Also chapters. It's chapter 7 of Revelation. So 14 and 7. So rewinding. Apologize. After I saw these things, this is Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. So then you had the tribe of Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. So to answer the question off the bat, who are the 144,000? Are they from all over the world? They are not from all over the world. They are from the tribes of Israel. So all of them are listed, and it looks that 12,000 from each of these tribes, which add up to 144,000, they are sealed in God. And then, do you have anything to say to that before we start moving into the next part of the question? I feel like that's
I do think like Revelation's tricky, because you have like a bunch of different viewpoints of whether this is literal or figurative.
Right.
The figurative side of this, which I actually like Miles' just explanation, especially in 14 when it tells you who the 144,000 are. I always pay attention in Revelation when it actually says, and this means this.
Yeah.
And that's important to look at when you're reading Revelation. So that's the literal side of it. The figurative side, which I think I lean both ways. It could be both. The figurative side is like it's in the encompassing people that are their minds are about God. Now, this is a very unpopular way to view about this, but whenever it talks about things on people's foreheads, it's always what they think. And then when it talks about hands, it's what they do. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is something to where these are the people that are just focused on who God is. And it's not necessarily like limited, but it's talking about the general sense of this is the completed people that do this. However, I would probably lean kind of into more what Miles is saying. That is a figurative look at this, because it's like when it says the mark of the beast, when it has like, it's written on your forehead and your hand, that's what you think and you do. Much like the phylacteries with the Pharisees, it says bind the scriptures on your forehead and your hand. And that was, Jesus was telling them that means what you think and what you do. So
Mm.
that's the figurative, side of it. It's not the literal side. So anytime you approach Revelation, you got to say, where's my stance on literal or figurative?
Yeah.
And you really got to dive into it
I
because
gotta
there's so
say,
much.
I haven't heard the figurative side of that particular passage before. That's interesting.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I've never
I
heard
really
that
like
before.
that too.
And
Yeah.
I a lot of times these issues that are controversial, you need to take the meat and throw out the bones of like what could it actually be both of these things,
Mm.
because there are passages in the Bible where it actually is both. But
Mm.
I don't have a hard stance on like
Yeah.
eschatology and that kind of thing.
Mm.
But yeah, I think what's tricky about the 144,000 is the Jehovah's Witness emphasis on it.
Mm.
And that's who's going to heaven, the 144,000. And that's where you got to be careful, because they will they'll try to add all these extra things that aren't actually there. So anyway,
Yeah.
those are some of my thoughts.
I really like what you said about just kind of being flexible, like kind of learning. For me, I love what you said about being careful with like, is it literal? Is it figurative? Because there's some places where it's really easy, like Beast of the Sea. It's like
Right.
it's a person,
Mhm.
it's there's not a, before when I was younger, I used to think that there was like this big gigantic beast like in the Pacific Ocean right now, just kind of
There is. It's
going
called
around.
Meg. It's like Jason Statham is fighting him currently. Yeah.
There we go. But it's imagery.
Yeah.
They're trying to paint a picture.
Mhm.
So the 144,000. Yeah, I didn't hear about that either. And I'm not opposed to it also, because I just have a lot of friends who we have different takes on the book of Revelation. And that's not the hill I'm gonna die on, So that's not to say that I'll just kind of like turn a blind eye. But for me, I'm just kind of like try to find the things that I can like hold on to. So for me, it's kind of like 144,000 of the tribes of the children of Israel. For me, it's kind of like it's pretty specific, like it's the children of Israel, and then it starts talking about the tribes, and then
Mhm.
it starts talking about Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher. And if it's metaphoric, then I'm thinking, which I'm still not opposed, but in my mind, I'm
Sure.
thinking like, what's the metaphor of Asher? What's the metaphor of Naphtali?
Yeah.
What's the metaphor of Zebulun?
Right.
So if it's a metaphor, we have to carry the metaphor.
Right.
So I'm not saying that, I mean, I think a bunch of Revelation is metaphoric. I would say, and I would argue, but not die on the hill, I would say the 144,000, it looks like it is the children of Israel.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
Cool.
move on.
Yeah.
Are they from all over the world? I would argue, I mean, if the Jews, I mean, you could still have Jews living in Italy and
Maybe it's helpful
America.
to start with what are the tribes of Israel, because they're kind of currently not all currently in Israel, like as we know it today. Like you said,
Mhm.
there are scattered. So maybe start with that. Just a brief overview of the tribes of Israel.
Right. So
Little history
Jacob,
lesson.
yeah, a little history lesson. So
Mhm.
Abraham had a wife, Sarah. They had a son, Isaac. Yes, he had Ishmael, but we're just going to kind of skip it for now. You had Isaac, and then Isaac had Jacob.
Mhm.
Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, but then he was bamboozled, and he ended up marrying Leah. And so Jacob ended up having Leah and Rachel, marrying both, and then they ended up giving their handmaids. It was a weird thing. Anyways, Jacob ended up having a bunch of kids, and Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And so he has a bunch of sons. The first is Reuben, then Simeon and Levi, and then Judah. And then it just goes all the way down. So you have the 12 tribes of Israel. And then Joseph came along, and he has two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And then they're kind of adopted or taken in. And I think essentially Jacob takes him as his own. Right?
Mhm.
He's like, all right, all right, Joseph, I know they're your sons, but they're mine now. So I'm not really familiar with the culture behind that, but that's essentially where we kind of get the 12 tribes of Israel. And then after Joseph is in Egypt, he invites all of his family to come with them during the famine, because they were really, really hungry. So they come on all over. And then because Joseph is like super in charge and in power, that's when hundreds of years pass. The children of Israel start multiplying. Now there's hundreds of thousands of Israelis there, Israelites, and then so much time passed to now the current Pharaoh has no idea who Joseph is, and then they're looking at this growing people group who became Israel. Then they get out, Moses delivers them, they wander in the wilderness, and then Joshua brings them into the promised land. And then this people group now has borders and a land, and then God gives them judges, gives them a government, or a monarchy, if you will. And then that's kind of where we get the kingdom of Israel, composed of the 12 tribes of Israel as originally established with Jacob.
Right.
So nowadays, modern times, Israel was destroyed in AD 70 by the Romans.
Right.
From that time until 1948, when Israel, the state, was established again, they were scattered all over the world, living in Europe, living in all over that area. Some coming to the United States, all that kind of stuff. So theoretically, the tribes of Israel could be not just in the state of Israel as we know it today, correct?
Right. Yeah, I think that's true. So technically speaking, are they from all over the world? Possibly, because different Israelis can be around the world.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're not different ethnicities of like,
right.
I don't know. I'm not they're all Jewish basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's if you take the literal standpoint.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And
so going back to some of that question here real quick. So it was saying, what is their function?
Yeah, what do? Do they kill demons? Well, you can't kill demons. You can only seal demons. Because they're eternal. Do they heal people? Okay, so what do they do? So it looks like they're sealed.
If I remember correctly from my reading, I believe they're a testimony to
that sounds right.
That I believe they were testifying of God to the rest of the world. But I could be wrong. It's been a minute since I've
there was a
refreshed
song.
myself.
So we know that they sing a song. Because it says in chapter 14, verse 3, they sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one can learn that song except for the 144,000. So it looks, for one, what do we know about them? I believe that they're people. I don't think they're like
they represent people.
Yes.
They either represent or they are the actual people. It's like, again, the symbolism. It depends on if you take the figurative or the literal side of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know that they sing a song. It looks
like... Is this song literal or is this song not literal? Like, are they actually walking around singing a song that no one can learn?
Well, it says, and I heard the sound of harps playing their harps.
Right.
So I want to say, but then again, but look at chapter 14, verse 1, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion. Like, it's not a lamb, it's Jesus. It's not like a little baby innocent lamb, and it's Jesus. So that standing on Mount Zion, like, now is it flipping back? So I'll just give you my opinion. I think one that I'm holding loosely. It looks like these are a literal 144,000 people. It looks like they were redeemed from the earth. I don't know how they were redeemed from the earth, but it looks like these people might be young because they were all virgins. So it looks they didn't have any sexual relations, and these are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So it looks like this. I'll answer the question for the function. It looks like these people have the special role to be able to sing a song that was specifically given to them, and their role is following Jesus. I think that's kind of these are the ones that follow him wherever he goes. The redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb, and in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. It looks like they might have died already in this case.
I think
it's just possible.
I think that's what redeemed from the earth means.
Okay.
Maybe. Again, these are maybes. Anytime you're in Revelation, I don't take a hard stance because I actually am really open to hear what people think about it myself. But getting into the if you have a certain view about Revelation, it's going to put it in a certain lens. I would encourage you to, if you're interested, to study all the different kinds of views.
Yeah.
But don't get lost in it, because then you're going to miss the heart of what the book of
Mhm.
Revelation is about. And that can definitely happen, where you're reading and you're getting to the details of who are the 144,000, but you're missing the big picture of what they're trying to say about Revelation in general, because you can get lost in the details. And then it's just kind of like, we're not going to know every little detail, because we're still trying to decipher right now, like, what's symbolism or what isn't.
Right.
So it could be both. It could be a totally different, I don't know. It's I do think there's a way to get answers that where you feel closure and satisfied, but don't obsess over it, because you can get so lost.
Yeah, and you want to be kind of, you don't want to add to what the Bible says either.
No.
So like, I can only like, I just know that they sing a song because I read it here, and that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
And I know that they follow Jesus because it says these are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Like, that's where I leave it there. But honestly, I really like what you said about just kind of just not getting so hung up on it. Like, one of the things that I learned was just learning to run laps around the Bible, like, because the New Testament is so kind of small, just constantly running laps, just reading. You read through Matthew, you read through Mark, you read through Luke, you read through John, you just keep on going. And as you kind of run your lap, you just kind of like, oh, I learned this. Oh, I learned this. And then as you continue to run, your knowledge isn't perfect, but it becomes more established. It becomes more grounded. And for the really big questions that you just have no idea on, then you can just talk to people. You can read commentaries and just be open to learning. It's God's word. He's an infinite God. We're not going to understand everything about the 144,000, when we're here, and if we think we can, then,
Again, I'll stress the danger of when people are saying, oh, you're not of the 144,000, therefore you're not. Like, there's like, the enemy can really throw a lot of lies in this stuff, and we have to guard ourselves to the legalism that can come out of. I mean, I've heard a lot, not just from Jehovah's Witness, but to obsess over that topic, it can really like cause you to like lose sleep, and you're like, oh man, I'm worried about where I stand and all that stuff. But again, like, the book of Revelation was written to bless us, not to stress us out.
Right. And the Bible, when it talks about salvation, it talks about we're justified by faith. And if, whoever believes shall not perish, not if whoever's part of the 144,000, it doesn't say that. So salvation, I feel like for those people who say you need to be a part of the 144,000 to be saved, I'd say, where do you get that?
Right.
Tell me, where does it say that about the 144,000? Because I don't see it. So I think it'd be good to ask those questions when people tend to add,
extra commentary.
144,000.
Real quick, I want to cover off on a couple things. So Miles sent us a 5. He has a question we'll get to in just a second, but thank you for that. And then Smile913 became a member. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also had a couple rapid fire questions from Gamer Dude. I want to kind of ask a couple of these because I think they're interesting.
Okay.
One of them was, are there foods and drinks that I should avoid to get close to God?
Interesting question.
That could be a rapid fire one. It might. I don't know if that one's one that you want to think about for a second.
Yeah.
To get closer to God.
Yeah,
to get closer to God. And then I also see another one that he said. Oh no, that's from someone else. Okay, so food and drinks should I avoid to get close to God? Yeah, to get close. Avoid.
What's coming to my mind is when people would fast certain things, and the point of fasting is to humble yourself before the Lord, right? It's not I'm better spiritually than all of you, right? That's the whole thing. I do think that avoidance of abstaining from alcohol is a good idea, but you don't want to get legalistic about it, because there's that's a whole topic. But I think what is that passage where he says?
I think as a general,
all things are.
I was about to just say something along those lines. Yeah.
Right. And not all things are beneficial. So like, hey, like we're good. There's no like thing that's just going to prevent you, unless you're like outright doing drugs or something.
Right.
But like, getting closer to God is a heart issue. It's not ritual stuff. is that's what the Pharisees were saying, is like, look at all these things that I've done to set myself aside, but they were missing everything else. And so I think abstaining from certain things, like let's say you want to, just, fast, like a Daniel fast is like fasting like meat and certain things like that, and you're just doing like vegetables and grains, I believe
Sure.
it is.
Yeah.
That was specific for Daniel. It wasn't a requirement for everybody to do.
Yeah.
So you don't want to put that on yourself as like, oh, I need to do a Daniel fast or something like that. I think the whole point of fasting is waiting on the Lord, humbling yourself, and hearing from him. But those aren't the things that bring you closer to God, because there's some people that do all kinds of fasting or all kinds of dieting or abstaining from things, like monks and things like that, and yet they're not getting close to God,
Yeah.
because it's about the action and not about the heart behind the action. So I don't know if you have some thoughts on it.
I think if I could add on to that real quick, my general thought is, I think you really touched on something important there, is that getting close to God is a heart issue, not necessarily a ritual thing, whether it's the foods you're eating, the exercise you're getting, or the activities you're doing. It's a heart issue. And I would say if food is causing you to have a problem of gluttony or sin of some sort, that maybe that should be under control. I think everything can be enjoyed with some stipulations, but most everything, especially food, can be enjoyed with control.
Yeah, I love
with
the
some
quote.
temperance.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
I love the quote that I heard from someone that, fasting without prayer is just a diet. So if you're doing that, that's not necessarily going to get you closer to God.
Yeah.
Is you must be praying and engaging with God to get closer to him. So the fasting is a vehicle to get you there, but the gas is what is your prayer that actually like drives you to get actually closer to who he is.
Yeah.
Because if you're not praying, if you're not trying to like seek him on that level, which is the thing that he gave us to connect to him, to get closer to him. He gave us his word. He gave us the ability to talk with him. Those are the core essentials. But what were you gonna?
A passage I thought of was from 1 Timothy 4, where it says, we'll start in verse 1 and we'll kind of go into verse 4, but it says, now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, taking heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For every creature of God is good, and nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving. So one of the things that I'd probably say is like, food is a gift, and God has given us food. And when Adam and Eve were in the garden, like they gave them a bunch of food that they needed. So certain foods, it also makes me think of 1 John, where it says the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. I think if certain food can bring out like a certain like sinful lust, and now all of a sudden you're losing control, where now you're just like, no, I gotta do it, then at that point, then certain foods might be wrong, because now it might turn into a form of bondage, where now you need to eat this thing, and now it turns in like it can turn into an addiction. Like I think that we should take care of our bodies, and that part of that, is probably eating a little healthy. Now, we should also receive things with thanksgiving. But what I would say to you is, should I get rid of certain foods? Should I get rid of certain drinks? It sounds like it needs to, you need to have a conversation with God personally. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this?
And Gamer Dude, we actually did a video on how to get closer to God that I think is actually really pertinent to your conversation and your questions here. I'm seeing a few of the other ones that you're asking, and I think they're all kind of related. I'd encourage you to check that out. But any tips on actually getting closer to God instead of just the food thing, Miles? As we got to keep moving here, but if you have any quick thoughts.
Tips on getting closer to God?
Yeah, if you have any.
I have something off the top of my head that I like to say to people when they're asking that is, we want to, be in God's presence, right? But the Holy Spirit lives in us, so he's actually always with us. He's always present. It's sometimes our lack of acknowledging that he's with us. When you look at what Jesus said to like how to be in his presence, he says, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. And then they ask, like, well, we didn't see you. He says, when you did it to these people, you did it to me. So a lot of times serving from a heart of love to God can get you closer to him, because you're actually, when you help someone out that's in need, it's a way that you're actually doing it to Jesus. You're giving, like, that's what Jesus said himself. And so, like, let's say you meet someone on the street and they're hungry, and you're like, hey, let me buy you a sandwich or something like that. And you sit there, you give it to them. That was Jesus you did it to. So that is literally the closest that you could get, is Jesus's presence, is by doing that kind of thing. Now, you don't want to do religious and say, oh, I'm better than people because of all these nice things I do. But if you're trying to get closer to God, you need to engage in loving people the way Jesus loved people. Because I think and it becomes a joy. It doesn't become a task. It's just something where you listen, the Holy Spirit prompts you to act, and then you do something for God. And then it's like you're right there with him, and he's actually so close to you in that moment.
Yeah, if I were to add like just points, because I'm a point guy, step guy, I would always kind of, when people want to get closer to God, there's always kind of 4 that I always lean towards. And it's God's word, prayer, fellowship, and ministry. And you were kind of like really hammering in the ministry, and I could dive into it, and I will for a little bit, but in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God. Like, it's the word, and the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So if you really want to get close to God, you really have to dive into his word. You have to dive into what he says. And we have videos for that, how to study the Bible, beginner and intermediate level. And then the next one is pray. The disciples wanted to know how Jesus prayed. And he says, when you pray, like, don't pray repetitious things, understand that God is your father, understand that he is in heaven, understand that he is holy, and just learning how to pray. And we have videos on that too. And part of being close to God is also seeing other people in your life who are close to God, and it's like, hey, how do you get close to God? There's just some people you feel the fire, and you're just like, oh, wow, like, I'm encouraged. I see God in you, and you just are encouraged by their wisdom. So you hang out with those people. So, and then you serve. And I loved what you said about that. So I would probably say those 4 things, and you just take small steps. You draw near to God, though, because it says that in James chapter 5, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. I'm sorry, I think it's chapter 4.
All right, we got to keep moving here. So Miles,
let's keep moving.
We have a question from another Miles.
Oh, wow.
It says, hello, Miles. Do you know if you can be saved after the second coming of Christ?
Okay. I'm trying to find that.
That's
wow. We have quite a few things. Okay. So, do you know if you can be saved after the second coming of Christ? That would really depend on kind of their eschatological, that's a fun word, eschatological viewpoint. Because if you're a pre-trib person, then the way it works is there's a rapture that happens before the 7-year tribulation. After the 7-year tribulation, that's when Jesus comes back and he sets his 1,000-year reign. And then after the 1,000-year reign, then you have the great white throne judgment and everything. So that's the pre-trib rapture. And for the most part, a mid and post-trib rapture would kind of align with the same things. Just, it kind of aligns with after the 7-year tribulation, then Jesus comes back. But then there's the amillennialist point of view. And that is the one where they're kind of expecting Jesus to come right now. And then like everything is kind of done, I think.
That's where I would put my view on that. I would say, even to answer this question, I would just say yes, because he desires that all might be saved. And that's, you got to pay attention in the Bible when he says all and every. Anytime in the Bible it says all and every, especially when it talks about the nations, and there's a lot of stuff like that. But it's like, oh, it's too late, like I don't buy into that. That's personally, I don't think oh, it's too late for you and you're just gonna suffer now. And but that's I don't know
In other
what
words, there's
it
no
is.
like final deadline, is what you're saying.
Well, it's like, look at the thief on the cross, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is he had till the very, very, very last minute, and he didn't have this big life to live. And I understand that's the context for him. But to me, like, people, praying to God on their deathbed, absolutely, they're going to heaven. Regarding this, like, eschatology side of things, I think it's in God's nature to forgive people that have willing hearts. And that's what I know about God, is that the people that are asking forgiveness, he forgives freely, and he has a lot of grace. But yeah,
What I will say to that is, if they are alive, it looks like they can be saved. And there's it's only after death. There's the eternal state is what you call it,
Yeah.
And when you die, you hit this eternal state where you either go to heaven to be in the presence of the Lord, or you go to Hades or hell. And that's kind of when it's over. Because in Luke chapter 16, when the rich man was looking at Lazarus and it was like, hey, can you please let Lazarus dip his finger in water and put it on my tongue? And and Abraham was like, no, there's no way. There's a chasm between us. People who are there can't come here, and people who are here can't come there.
Yeah.
So there is a state of permanency after death. So
Yeah.
my argument is, so long as they are alive, it looks like they can still be saved. There are some unforgivable sins, though.
Sure.
And so blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, and we talk about that in the video. And I will also say the mark of the beast. It says whoever gets the mark of the beast will drink from the cup of God's wrath. So it looks like the mark of the beast is a form of an unforgivable sin. So
I would
if
say that
this-
is the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit in its
it's probably
purest
synonymous.
form.
Yeah, I would probably say that's a really good argument. But I will say that if they are alive and they are not in the state of permanency yet, in that eternal state, it looks like they can still be saved.
Yeah. And even the passage you said about Abraham and Lazarus, I think that's clearly why purgatory isn't a thing. You can't pray people out of purgatory so they're saved. Once they're dead, that's kind of
It's over.
Yeah.
You can't go to this side, and it's very, very clear. Very nice. Good question.
We got to keep moving here. First of all, I want to say thank you to Christine, who gave us a 2. Appreciate that. She made the comment about the food and drink. Any food or drink that controls you, avoid. Very true. Phoenix gave us a 5. Thank you so much for that. He has a question. We will get to that in just a second. I want to go back to this one here from Smile913, who became a member on this chat. So asks here, hi, I'd like to know how to discern God's will. I need to make a career choice soon, and I feel left on my own. If God seems silent, am I free to make my own choice? Any advice would be appreciated.
I love career choice questions. Okay. Well, I just want to say a quick prayer. God, I pray that you would help this person to be able to that you give them peace in whatever they decide to do. Please take care of them, lead them, give them wisdom. And I pray that you'd give me and Johnny and Joseph just wisdom as we try to encourage them in their career choice. So we thank you, God, in your name. Amen. All right. So discerning God's will, and I need to make a career choice soon. Oh man. And you feel left on your own. I'm sorry you feel on your own, but you're on your own right now, because right now we're on your side. So let's see. Am I free? How would you tackle this question? I have a lot of ways. I just want to jump on it. So I want you to have it for now.
Okay. Thanks.
You want me to go?
No.
Okay.
I think it's a great question to ask. I think, wanting to do God's will, you're already on the right track. So be encouraged. Your heart is set in the right direction already. And when you have kind of an A and B choice, that's when, obviously stress happens. But really, God's looking at your heart more than, if you do this, oh, you weren't in my will. If you do that, you were. I do think that there's, sometimes God gives us options, and some of those things are, so like, sometimes you'll have a bad option and a good option. but sometimes he'll give you two options, or but they're both actually good. I don't know the details of your situation, but I know regarding God's will, the Bible actually talks about what to do to stay in His will, and I
Mm,
want to look up that passage. I think it's really important. But when I'm trying to make a decision that could be life changing, um, r- after I've kind of prayed through it and things like that, like regarding like it affects my family, it affects like my life and my career, or if I'm moving and that kind of thing. I try to run it by like three other people that I know
mm,
and trust
That's a good one.
that are God fearing, not to just do whatever they say, but to run it by them. It's kind of like, get a second and third and fourth opinion on that, especially if someone is like, they're pouring into you spiritually. The advice that we could give, because we don't know you, would be, is one choice going to actually make it easier for you to connect to God versus the other one? I always try to look at that. What is the
Hmm.
one that's actually going to bring me to a place where I can engage with God in a deeper way, and it's going to stretch my faith sometimes, because sometimes those decisions I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this, but this will actually would like allow me to trust God in this situation. Now again, that's with me not knowing details, but I try to look at what is going to bring me closer to who God is, depending on the situation. If something's going to really affect me and like my well-being and my life and my schedule to where I'm not connecting with people and that kind of thing, like I don't think making a decision too quickly is a good idea. And definitely run it by some people and see what they think.
Some thoughts that I have is I don't think you should view it from a right or wrong perspective. Like, is option A the right choice, or is option B the right choice? If it's kind of if you're kind of hit with the like in the fork in the road. For me, like I wanted to become a firefighter for the longest time in my life, and I remember trying to pursue that for like 8 years. Like I worked in an ambulance for a little bit. I volunteered in something called search and rescue. And in my pursuit of those things, I learned, and as I was like one of the leaders in search and rescue. And when I was a leader in search and rescue, one of the things that I learned about myself there is I love to teach. I loved hanging out with my crew. I loved talking with them. I liked pushing people to be better and stronger. But then I stopped being a firefighter, and the reason why is because I learned, well, I knew this already, but I learned that they had to work 24-hour shifts. And for me in my mind at the time, I thought, you know what? I kind of value my family. And if I were to be married one day, I don't know if I'd be comfortable leaving them for 24 hours at a time. So for me, I made that decision. I made it and I said, you know what? I'm not going to be a firefighter anymore because of this. It didn't cross my mind like, does God want me to be a firefighter? No, I think God gives us wisdom. Like, I'll tell you what God's will is, First Thessalonians 5, and everything you do, give thanks. That's God's will. What's God's will? That you flee sexual immorality. Like, God's will is very clear in a lot of things, but nowhere in the Bible does it say God wants you to be a police officer. God wants you to. So I feel like we have the freedom. God has given us the capacity to kind of really think through things. And I'll tell you, when I was in search and rescue, I learned a lot of discipline stuff, and I used it when I was a teacher. God used that road in me being in a firefighter to equip me for the next chapter in my life. And then I became, then I worked in construction for a little bit. I'm like, okay, maybe I can try my hand in construction. And then I worked as a tax preparer, like
I
as an
remember
accountant. Yeah,
that.
I know. And so and it's interesting. I know, because I thought if I work as a tax preparer, I only need to work like 4 months out of the year, like January to April, you know? But then I hated my life for those 4 months, And so I'm like, you know what? I don't think this is for me. But guess what? When I became a teacher, they asked me, oh, so what do you do? I'm like, oh, well, right now I'm an accountant. Well, what do you want to teach? And they're like, oh, well, I'd love to teach the Bible. And they're like, oh, well, we have an opening for a personal finance class and a Bible class. So I'm like, sure. you know? So God didn't want me to probably be an accountant, but he used me going down that path to equip me so that I could know my stuff in finances that I still use today. So all of that to say, it's about the journey. God wants to equip you, you know? So how you'd like to know how to discern God's will? You stay in his word. You pray. You talk to people like what Johnny was saying. And honestly, I would say pick the one you want to, you know? And if you like them both equally, you know, I like do your best to try them out. You know, I would just try to gain wisdom. I would try to do I would try to shadow people, like in both careers, shadow people, because I remember trying to pursue law enforcement too. And when I pursued law enforcement, it looked fun, but in my mind, I'm like, this is gonna get boring after a few years. Like, I just love teaching, you know, and so like, and I'm glad and grateful that you know that it allows me to be able to go to Japan. Like, I know that you and me are going to go to Japan. So if I were to get sucked into a job in law enforcement and firefighting, I wouldn't be able to go to Japan with you all together with our team later on this year. So if I were to give my wisdom in a nutshell, I would say how to discern God's will, stay in his word, stay in prayer, and do whatever you want.
I would say, generally speaking, yeah, Miles, it's you know, I've had those kinds of forks in the road moments too in career decisions, and I've met so many people who have struggled with this, and for some reason I kind of came along these lines early on in my career paths, and it was really like God gave you desires and passions and things that you're interested in, and he wants you to pursue those things. He gave you natural gifts. If you're, you know, Miles, you said you hated your life as a tax preparer. Like, right?
Don't know how they do it.
It's clearly not something you're interested in. So if you have the opportunity, a fork in the road moment, where it's like teaching or tax preparer, it's like, I want to be a teacher. So I'm going to pursue that. You know, it's okay to do that. God gives us these desires. They're God given. And I think recognizing that and saying, this is something I'm interested in, that can only come from above. God made me this way. I have these interests. I have these passions and interests. And it's okay to accept that. It's not a right or wrong. If I go this way, I'm going to make a mistake. God's going to zap me, or I'm going to have a lifetime of like problems. It's, you know, life is a lot about like this trial and error thing. And sometimes you have to course correct. Sometimes you don't choose necessarily the most optimal path, and you have to course correct. It sounds like you did quite a few of those, Miles, with the firefighting and tax preparing, and you course corrected. And now you found your niche and you found your groove and you're rocking and rolling, you know, and that's okay. But you have to make a decision. I think you've used the analogy, you can't steer a parked car. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true. You have to be moving forward. You have to make a decision.
And I like what you said about making a decision. Whoever this person is, Smile 913, I will say, own your decision. Don't say like, oh, God told me that I had to do this. Because let's say like the plan changes and now you're like, but God, I thought you told me, you know? No, we're supposed to exercise wisdom, you know? So I will say, like I said before, just do those things that will get you closer to God and own your decision. Like, okay, God, I feel like I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this now. Okay. Let me know if there's anything I should know about, and you just move forward, you know, just you grow as you go.
I'll say one thing too, that I think I was 25, and one of my mentors said this to me because I was in a similar situation where I didn't know what to do. And it's like, well, what if I make the wrong decision? And he says, God has a way of making another plan A, where it's like, maybe you do choose the one that wasn't right, but God is so easily able to course correct you right on. Like, the plan A, it's not hard for him. Even if you make the wrong decision, he has a way of course correcting. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If you have that in your mind.
Yeah, to that point, I actually don't think that God is surprised by your decisions, and the decision you make is the wrong decision. It's not like he went, I had this whole plan and now you've ruined it. Hang on, I gotta crumple this plan up, start again. You know, he's not doing that. He knows what decision you're going to make. He allows us to have that sense of not knowing everything and having to make those decisions, to exercise our faith, to ask God for wisdom, to do those things. But it's not like he's going, oh, you've ruined everything. Now I got to replan all that. It's
Right.
like he knows the course of your life. And each thing, whether it's to you the most optimal thing or not, to you the best decision for your career or not, you know, with the hindsight you've been given, he has full hindsight from your life from start to A to B. And he knows these things are going to shape you along the way. Miles, you picked up quite a few skills doing the different career paths that you went on, and you're using them to this day. And those things have shaped you. Those things have honed you to be the person that you are today. You wouldn't have those skills without going on that path. And God's used those things. So it's not like it was a failure.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, no, yeah, you pretty much said it. You took the words out of my mouth.
Right,
but yeah, let's keep on going. What's the next question?
All right, so I want to get to this one from Phoenix, who sent us the 5. He says, what do men of God do for fun and entertainment? Well, speaking as a man of God, I have to say, I think it's for fun and entertainment. I mean, I would like to think I'm trying to be a man of God. I would like to think I'm pursuing that. I would say I enjoy sports. I enjoy going and hanging out with friends, watching movies. I mean, occasional video games. Is there a verse that you have that comes to mind for this, Miles? Or is this just...
I have some verses actually.
Yeah.
But I could probably just say it from the some thoughts initially for me is that God has made us different, you know, like David was much different than his son Solomon, you know, and Abraham was much different than Joseph. And so for one, I'll say there's variety, you know. I don't think all people are, you know, and even it says in 1 Corinthians 12 that all of us have different giftings. And God has designed, you know, the body of Christ to be uniquely gifted. So I will say that the types of entertainment and fun is gonna vary because God has just made us, you know, with different souls, with different inclinations. So what do men of God do for fun and entertainment? It kind of makes me think of loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And it makes me think of the different, it kind of goes back to the Sabbath.
Yeah.
There's like with your strength, it deals with your physical body, you know, with your soul or with your mind, it's the things that you think about. And with your, you know, with your soul, like what you kind of want to do, like your innermost self. So the things that I like to do for fun are the things that kind of build those things, you know, and I kind of get enjoyment from those. So, like for the body, like I like to lift, you know, I like to lift weights. I should lift more, but I do like to lift weights. Like my other friend Johnny came over and we'll play music and we'll encourage each other and we'll just lift weights. You know, there was a time when not too long ago I'm getting back into jujitsu. It's jujitsu is just my family's love language. You know, my dad does it, my brother-in-law, my other brother, you know, and so we're all just doing jujitsu. And I like getting punched for some reason. So I like Muay Thai. Like for some reason, it's just the adrenaline. You just get knocked, and you're like, I want more. So I think that's fun, you know. But I think that there's a physical aspect that should probably be done for in a lot of the books that I've read, a lot of people back then would like go for walks. I know some of them went like horseback riding. Some of them would like to wake up early and, you know, so I would say the body should be exercised to some degree, you know, because I just feel like as guys, we like to do things. And if we just kind of are, I just find my mind hits this weird fog, this weird like blah kind of state if I'm not doing anything. You know, like I want to go out. I want to do things. So I think part of the fun and entertainment is actually going out. I also think another important thing with guys is camaraderie. We like it when guys have our backs. You know, I think this is kind of more fun just having you physically here, Johnny, because like, you know, I'm not that I'm by myself with Joseph, but Joseph's so far and I'm all the way here in California, you know? And so I think camaraderie, doing things together, is also a type of fun and entertainment. And the first thing that Jesus did as soon as he began his ministry was build a community. He said, hey, follow me, hey, follow me, hey, follow me. He grabbed 12 guys and he brought them all together, and they regularly hung out. And so I think part of having fun and having entertainment is having a group of people to kind of live life with. So those are things I'd say. Probably something physical, something in there, just because in my experience, I feel off and weird when I don't do anything. It doesn't need to be lifting weights or punching somebody, but it should be something to get the blood
Let's
flowing.
clarify: boxing or something in a martial art, not just punching people.
Yeah, someone's gonna like splice me at that
let's
moment. Like, don't
clip
listen.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts, Johnny?
Well, I think that we do basically what everybody else does for entertainment, just not the sinful stuff. But I mean, like, I think to really think about the question, it's a good question, because it makes you pause and kind of think about, oh, like, is there something that I can do to stand out as a man of God with like my entertainment life or my fun life? And I think the thing that I like to do is I like to have a challenge, whatever it is. Some people have like game nights. I mean, video games do that in some ways, and sometimes you can totally not have a good time. But also, like, what I like to do is I like to play billiards, because it's something where I'm always challenged. But also, like, when I'm with other people, like you said, like teams and things like that, like there's a challenge that you're trying to rise up to and kind of overcome and get to. And I think that actually can really affect your spiritual life if you let it, because even something as like watching movies. Oh, I'm not gonna watch movies, those are sinful. Well, not all of them are. A lot of times you can watch a movie and get great insight from them, and they're deep and they're meaningful and they open discussion. And I think incorporating God into those things that are just like you enjoy to do. And to make it simple, I would just say, what's something that makes you want to rise up to the challenge? Because I think that could benefit all kinds of like areas of your life. And you could do that by yourself or with a group of people. I think they both have unique benefits to them. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I mean, we know Jesus fished, so maybe fish is the right answer. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in those same lines, guys. It's like, I really enjoy volleyball, and I'm learning tennis right now. But like, I like doing sports that I can play with other people, because especially like on a weekend when I'm not working, it's like I really enjoy just getting outdoors, spending it with people. I've been doing some Krav as well, so I'm also in that like martial arts world. I think that's been fun. Nice. And you meet people there too, and I think that you learn some discipline as well, which is also really fun. But yeah, I think all those are really good answers. I don't know if I have too much more to add on that. I would just say like,
that one was fun. I really enjoyed that question.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that is a good one. Okay, so just below it, we have probably time for.
How many do we have? How much do we not get?
We don't have a ton. We don't have a ton yet.
We're,
a lot of
we're
it's
doing
just
okay.
comments. There's two here. One from Alex that I want to get to is right below it. It says, why does God mention the Leviathan in the Old Testament? Just to show his strength. That's what I'm inclined to believe, but I haven't read too much into it.
Yeah, the Leviathan. Let's see. I forgot. I want to say it's in Job, but I'm not on
Job.
Job. Let's go ahead and pull that up really fast. Leviathan. Okay, so Job 3:8. It says, "May those curse it who this day those who are ready to arouse Leviathan." And then it says Job 41:1. Can you drop the Leviathan with a hook or snare his tongue with a line? I remember the Leviathan being able to breathe fire. Am I right?
I have some thoughts on it.
Yeah. Go ahead and talk about it. I'm going to go ahead and read this a little bit more.
Leviathan during that time period was a big, because Job is a poetic book, right? It's written in a very poetic way, and there's a lot of parallels and things like that. But the Leviathan is a character in mythology that the writer of Job, which it's kind of debated who wrote it, but the writer of Job was using Leviathan as this ominous creature that had a lot of power and kind of authority. And that's why a lot of Satanists like attribute Satan to Leviathan, although I don't think that. But it's this evil kind of power. But when you look in the book of Job, it's like, yeah, that doesn't matter to God. Like he can, like it's like God versus Satan isn't yin and yang.
Right.
It's God creator over all, and everything else is creation. And Leviathan is another part of creation that was, treacherous as far as the mythology goes. There are some like speculation on whether it was an actual animal or not, but I don't know if that's necessary, because the heart behind what the writer is getting across is that Leviathan is basically not even a match for who God is, because like even though he's this treacherous creature, like God has the authority, which shows that in spiritual warfare there is a level of power that the enemy has, but God has the authority over that. And I think that's kind of like when I read Job, I mean, I kind of look at it that way. Is he's like, look, like, can you do this to Leviathan, that to Leviathan? Like, yeah, it's like I made Leviathan, and it's kind of like it's God's way of showing his and demonstrating his power a little bit.
Yeah. No, that's I really like what you said about how it just kind of resembles. I guess the focus isn't on the Leviathan. The focus really is on God, and kind of like when you look at God's response to Job, like Job was going through the toughest time. He was just like, oh, I can't believe this. Like his kids died, his health is gone, everything that he had is gone. Like this man is at the lowest of the low, and God's response to him is the Leviathan. He's like, what's this? Like, can you do that with the Leviathan? No, but I can. And I think a lot of people would kind of view God's response as being a little insensitive, because God said essentially to Job, I'm God, you're not. What do you know? Like I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. But at the same time, like God restored Job. And I think Job's story is inspiring, because it tells me that whatever Job was able to go through, he got through it. I think that I think Job lived the hardest life, honestly, minus Jesus, who died that horrible death. I think Job, his story inspired so many people. He doesn't even realize it, because our situation, I love what you said about like, oh yeah, the Leviathan, he's a side character. He is just there to kind of show that like God's bigger, so
real quick on this. Christine brought this up, and I've heard this before as well. That Leviathan was a dinosaur. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, it doesn't really matter to what you guys are saying, but at the end of the day, God is still more powerful than it. But what's your thoughts on that, real quick?
I think Behemoth is more likely, based on the description. Leviathan, the thing that sets it apart is when it talks about the fire breathing stuff, which is where the mythology of Leviathan comes from. It goes to that debate whether it was an actual creature or not. We don't know. Like,
sounds like it was a sea creature too,
right?
Based off of the hook and all that.
I'm trying to find the place where it breathes fire, because I do remember
coming out of his nostrils or something like that.
Right.
I've heard theories that Leviathan was related to like mosasaur or something like that. But again, that's if you kind of have the if people walked with dinosaurs, and that's kind of that's a whole rabbit trail. But I think things are possible, because we only know so much about the history of like when Job was written and all that kind of stuff. Like we know it was very old, as far as like
Job was argued to be the oldest book written and recorded.
But I think it does kind of go back to Leviathan is mentioned in mythology as the sea creature and that kind of thing. And in context to Job's story, like it was Satan who was afflicting Job. And so it's also God showing like this, that because if he would have said the word Leviathan and it was purely mythological, like Job would have associated to, oh, that's my enemy. That's my, that's the evil and that kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting how,
from 41:1, it does say, can you drop the Leviathan with a hook or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Can you put a reed through his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook. So it looks like this thing is actually like a big thing. Like, hey, do you
Yes.
think you could put a little hook there? You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
no, this it's like completely, because when God was talking to Job, he was talking about like creating the mountains and creating these things. Can you
Mhm.
pull the seas? Can you,
Right.
divide the line? And so the idea is, can you draw out a Leviathan with a hook? It's like an impossible thing that only God can do. So this thing has to be
Yeah.
somewhat gigantic.
But that's why I would say it's a mosasaur, which that thing in Jurassic World that grabbed the shark, that. Or the other thing is the behemoth maybe was like a sauropod, like a
Can you imagine seeing one of those things?
Yeah.
I would be freaking out.
I would probably say the Leviathan, though, to close off this question, is
Yeah.
I would probably say it was a creature. If someone said it wasn't a creature, I'm like, okay, sure, but I would say it's a creature because there's so many things that go extinct these
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
so give it a few thousand years, it's gonna be gone, so I'd probably say it was.
Yeah.
Do I know
Yeah.
that for sure? I don't know,
Yeah.
but there's so much of the sea that's unexplored too.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
maybe
I think they found recently they found a creature that they thought was extinct. It was a big, some sort of mammal or fish or something, and they were like, "Oh, I
yeah.
thought this was gone." Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, real quick. So we got a new member on Andreas. Thank you, welcome. And then we got Miriam, who also joined. So thank you guys for that. I want to hit this super from Cameron real quick. It says, okay, so God promised something. It looks impossible. Can God do anything, right? Or God can do anything, right?
Okay.
I don't know if you see that up there. It's
Yeah, I see
basically
it.
God.
So
I
God
think God
promised
promised
something,
Cameron something, and it looks
and it
impossible.
looks impossible.
Wants some reassurance there.
Okay.
So the question
So
is, God can
there's-
do anything, right?
The truth is God can do anything, and so that we know. The question is, I think it's kind of hard to speak to when we don't have a lot of context on what is it you're talking about with God promised something. So it could be a personal thing, which if you feel God's promised something to you personally, I think there's a lot of checks and balances on if it's God doing that or not. There's some things that are crystal clear in scripture that God promises, but on a personal level, yeah, I don't know if I could speak to that.
So I'm just going to be a little technical because God can do anything. God can't sin, so he can do anything that requires power. So like crossing the Red Sea, God, that was easy for him, or it was easy for him to split the sea. So what I will say to you,
I would actually clarify that a little bit more, Miles. I would say God
Sure.
can do anything. He chooses to not sin. He's promised that he won't. And so he also said he's a man of, like, a person of his word, and he won't break his own promises. And he promised he won't sin. So he's bound himself in his own law, essentially. So it's not that he's incapable of doing it. It's that he's promised he won't. And he also has said he won't break his promises. He doesn't break his promises.
I see that. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. I don't think I could agree with that one because God is light and in him is no darkness at all. I don't think that it would be possible for
But the
God.
theoretical of him capable of doing things, right?
Well, he became sin, so it's actually even more than just us sinning. He actually became sin itself. So
Well, that's a good passage for that.
Yeah. So, like the whole, I don't really think we're getting on a tangent.
We are getting okay. Let's go back to the question. We'll have a separate live stream.
Good discussion.
Okay, so it looks God promised something. So to respond to this, because God can do anything, yes, I think that handles the question. But I would probably say, what has led you to believe that God has promised you something?
Right.
And I would probably, because one of the things that I am very careful to say is when I talk to people and I say, ooh, God told me this. And I'm like, God told me I'm going to Japan. God never told me to go to Japan. I feel like God is calling me to Japan, but I haven't heard a very specific word that said, Miles, you're going to Japan, So I would probably ask people in your life, older, spirit-filled guys who can lead you in the right direction, who care about you. And I would probably ask them, like, hey, I feel like God has promised me something. Because unless it's in the word, but even then, he has promised in his word and under the context, he has promised those things to certain individuals. So I would probably try to get wisdom from people because, yeah, God can do anything, but it all goes back to what you think he promised you. Like, did he come to you in a dream, or is it something that you think, or is it something that you feel, or is it something that is actually established? I would probably go and try to get some insight because God can do anything. At the same time, though, what is it that you think that God has promised you? It all goes back to that first statement. I would try and get clarity from that.
We're almost out of time here. There was something here that I wanted to hear. From Mr. Miller, who sent us a 5. Thank you for that. It says, what's the difference between free will and predestination?
Oh man,
we got to be careful.
We're going to end on
5 minutes.
We're going to end on free.
I mean, so you can explain it, and then we can maybe save the arguments for it in another time. But maybe you can explain the difference without getting too much in the weeds.
Sure.
You can do a quick answer on that one.
Okay, think so. Yeah. I'm glad one of us.
I believe in you.
I'm gonna get water. Okay. So free will. Well, we talked about it. Me and Johnny were teaching a class on theology, and we were talking about how free will is the freedom to do whatever you want. And I kind of clarified that only God has free will because he is the only one who can freely choose anything. Like, I don't have free will because I can't choose to bench press 400 pounds. I wish I could bench press 400, but I don't have the ability. I don't have the power. So whenever I hear free will, I always clarify it with what my mentor taught me, and that's choice. We have choice. We don't have all the available choices, but we do have the ability to make decisions. So what is the difference then between making our choice and God predestining people to heaven? So I know that predestination, it can be a cause for a lot of people to say, like, oh, well, do I really have choice if God has decided for me to go to heaven? And I will say, well, predestination is biblical. In Ephesians chapter 1, it talks about how we are predestined. And I know that there's another passage, I believe in Romans. I forgot exactly where, but it does. Oh, Romans 8, that we are predestined. So I will say that people are predestined to heaven. At the exact same time, though, God does incorporate choice, because it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. God wants for us to have a choice. And here's another thing too. In 1 John, it says that Jesus died for everyone. He died for everyone. So why would he die for the people that he didn't choose? So this is my answer, and it was an answer that I gave in my video. And is God is omnipotent, and because he is all powerful, he has chosen to give people a choice. And God knows that choice already because he's outside of time. And because he knows that choice, he has chosen those people. And so it's definitely a tough concept, especially when we're trying to think of a all-knowing, all-powerful God. Because if he didn't know, then he wouldn't be all-knowing. And if he's not all-knowing, then he's not the God that we serve. So all of that to say, what it comes down to, the simple answer is God has a choice. We have a choice.
Yeah.
Jesus died for that choice. He wanted us to have that choice. And we can choose him because it says, whoever believes in him, for God so loved the world. So all of those verses still stand. And at the same time, God still chose.
Yeah.
And I remember, go ahead.
No. Finish your thought. Sorry.
One of the conversations that I had with Johnny is a lot of people want to kind of not look at like, oh, God chose, predestination.
Right.
But it's a very beautiful thing about God, because like I know that God chose me despite all of my sins,
Right.
despite all of my failures, despite all of my shortcomings. Like God still chose me. It's not based on the law, it's not based on legalism, it's not based on works. It's purely based on grace, God's grace. And God wants to choose, but a lot of times we don't choose God. And so it takes two. It takes two to walk in a certain direction. And God's like, I chose to die for you. God made that decision. Okay. And it's up to people now to make the decision of whether or not they want to follow God. I think a lot of times people use it as an excuse to not follow God. Oh, well, God chose this. And it's like, no, God, you have the choice right now.
Right.
You can choose God.
It's responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah, the way I've always heard this, and maybe this isn't quite right, I'd love to actually hear your response to this, Miles, is I kind of struggled with this for a bit in kind of rectifying those two passages of how we have agency versus predestination and those kinds of things. And the way I kind of came down on it was that this is a struggle of us being within the time-space continuum and not understanding us, God being outside of time and having all, being able to see our lives from like start to finish and already knowing the choices
All
that
at
will
once.
be made within all at once. And it's not like you're surprising him with your choices. So in that sense, he already chose you, but you just don't know that he chose you yet. But you still have to come to him. It's like he knows the answer before you say it, but but you're still the one who did it. It's like that movie Tenet that's kind of like in like reverse. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it's like you still did the thing, whether or not you know that God already knew that or not, it doesn't really matter. God is outside of time. And so actually one thing that helped me with that was I was having trouble with the passage of the book of life, because I'm like, is God literally like, writing people's names and then like crossing them out? Oh, he didn't choose. And it actually has some interesting phrasing. It says, your name will be, names are found in the book of life, but they can only be blotted out.
Yep. I actually pulled that up immediately once you started talking about that. Psalm 69:28. It says, let them be blotted out of the book of the living and not be written with the righteous. So here's the thing too, to add on to that, what you just said is it looks, because I heard some people pray prayers of salvation and they would pray prayers like, write my name in the book of life.
Yes.
But that's not really biblical, because there's nowhere in the Bible, from what I see, where it talks about where God is writing down names. So
it's either found there already or it's been blotted out.
Yes, like there is a blotting that goes on. So that tells me
that's the predestination
God chose
part for me.
Everybody. I think God chose everybody to life.
Yeah.
But because they don't choose him, he blots them.
Yes.
And that's where the choice comes in. God chose everyone. God chose everyone to have an opportunity for salvation. That's why Jesus died. But not everyone chooses him, and that's where the blotting happens.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad we came down on that same, like that opinion there. I think that's like
so a key passage.
Yeah. It really, when I understood it that way, I was like, got it. Okay. That makes way more sense. We still have agency over, but he desires that all should be saved, So it's
and he desires all of us to have choice.
Right.
We don't want to take that away. He chooses, like in the same way we're like, God, don't I have a choice? Well, God has a choice too. It's a relationship. One, our friend gave me this illustration where someone is like hanging off of a cliff and he's going to die. God chose to extend his hand. Like he chose. And we also need to choose to accept that hand. Like it takes two for us to be saved.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time here. This was an awesome discussion. I feel like we hit a lot of really good ones here. Thank you all for who participated and asked questions. I hope we were able to get to everyone's. I think we were, but if not, I will go back through the chat and make sure we got to. I think there was a few that we probably didn't get to, but I think the majority of them we got to. So
if we didn't, then we can always answer the two questions.
Again, for those of you who are watching who are not members, always feel free to email us. We are reading those. Leave comments on the YouTube channel, on the videos that we post, and And yeah, we're watching all that stuff. We're still paying attention to those things. You know, one of these days we might have like a slow day, and we'll actually be able to get to all the other stuff that we have, like the questions and
Right.
things that we have there, Miles. But yeah, so we're out of time here. We're gonna be streaming again next week, going through some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think so. The time might change, but we're gonna try to have another live stream.
Yeah, the time might change, but we'll be posting about it, and we'll keep you guys in the know. But till next time, we are gonna sign off for the night or the day, wherever you are, and we will see you next time. Take care,
Okay.
guys. God bless.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.